Helpful for life.
Then we have the dry heat methods. Now, these methods are going to be a little better to obtain that delicious browning that you get with the Maillard reaction we were talking about earlier. And part of that's because most of the time, dry methods use heats that are 300 degrees and above. And also the fact that there's no liquid helps the Maillard reaction a little bit. The first heat method is baking. And I'm sure you've probably heard this before. Baking is the setting on the oven, and basically it's anytime you put something in the oven to radiant heat. Then there's roasting. Roasting is sometimes synonymous with baking, but usually it's more specifically meaning protein or veggies. So if someone tells you to bake some meat, it may sound a little better if you say roast some meat. I mean, just which one sounds better? And of course, that means the baking is often referred to with baked goods. So for example, bread, cookies, brownies, all of that kind of stuff. Then there's broiling, and broiling is basically a high heat from above. Broiling cooks the surface of the food very quickly. And most, if not all, ovens will have a broil setting, and they've got an element on top that gets really, really hot. And it's great for toasting bread, and you can toast a lot of bread at once too. However, you gotta watch it because that toast can go from white to black really fast. There was one time we were making these garlic bread things for some fondue we were making, and some of the bread may have caught on fire, but that's not important. Then there's the glorious grill, one of my favorite methods of cooking. And basically that's a method of heat where most of the heat comes from below, whether it be from charcoal or some type of wood or some type of gas that's been lit on fire, of course. And sometimes there's smoke involved too. Now, although most of the heat comes from the bottom, when you close a grill, it does create somewhat of an oven effect where the heat will circulate around the food as well. Then there's one of the most amazing cooking methods in my opinion, and that is the good old microwave. Or like we like to call it, hey, could you zap that for me? I mean, it's such an amazing tool, and in case you want to know the nice description of it, because I'm an electrical engineer, of course I'll tell you. So in simple terms, a microwave takes electricity and it turns it into radio waves, and those radio waves go into your food and they actually vibrate the molecules of that food. And as they vibrate and rub against each other, it gets all hot and bothered. Well, mostly just hot. The cool thing about the microwave though is that you can cook any number of things in it. You could cook a whole brownie in there, you could cook mac and cheese, you could make hot toddies. Okay, I just listed off all the things my wife likes to make, but you get the point. Toasting usually implies that you're making something maybe a little crispy, maybe a little brown, a little toasty. Now, the first thing you think of is bread when it comes to that. And how do you make toast? Well, obviously you can make toast in a toaster, which is basically just a sideways mini oven, or you can use a toaster oven, but you can also use a full-size oven or a grill or even a pan on your stove. One thing that people often don't think about is the ability to toast spices. If you take a dry pan, put it on your stove, dump some spices in and put it over the heat for a little while, you'll find that the flavors in those spices will begin to change. And guess what? They'll get a little more toasty. Then there's searing. Searing is when you brown something, typically a protein, by sitting it in the same spot on the pan for a while and letting a delicious crust develop. Then there's something called sautéing. S-A-U-T-E, sauté. Sautéing is when you have some fat in pan and then you add some other ingredients to it and have it on medium to high heat and you move them around a lot usually. A good example of something you may sauté would be onions and maybe some garlic. You just have that all chopped up, throw it in the pan, sauté it for a while before you add the rest of the ingredients. Lastly, there's frying. Now, even though you may think, well, Reed, frying is wet, that should be a moist cooking method. No, it's not, because frying is oil. Oil and water don't mix, so therefore it's a dry cooking method, because I said so. Now, let's start with one of the staple methods of the Deep South, and that is the deep fry. Deep South, deep fry, come on now. Now, the deep fry is when you submerge the food completely in the fat. Some big examples you may think of are chicken tenders and French fries. Those are two good things when they're deep fried. Then there's something called a pan fry. And you can actually do that at home on your stove a lot easier than you can deep fry because it uses a lot less oil, but you can still get that delicious crispy edge that you get when you fry something. Now, like I mentioned, oil and water don't mix. So if you're gonna be frying something, be careful, because if you put something that's really wet into a pan of hot oil, then you could end up with a nasty explosion. So be safe. Okay, that's enough about the different methods to cook. Let's get down to actually cooking some proteins.